Welcome to episode 17 of Beneath the Grandstands, and I am Alex Lohr, and you're Ryan Fenton. Just kidding. It's actually the reverse. So Ryan here talking to Alex, and Alex, I botched that because we said we don't even think people know the difference between our voices on this thing.
Just two short, white guys with stubble. All right, they sound the exact same.
But we're excited to join you once again. Today was a big announcement in the world of really running shoe brands with another, I say new brand. It's a brand that's been around for more than a decade, but new in the sense of really making a big investment into the professional side of the sport. So On Running, is launching their On Athletics Club, new professional training group. And Alex, you and I were fortunate enough to be a part of the launch. We were invited out to Portland, joined them a few weeks ago to put together a launch video kind of promoting this team that they've assembled. And I don't know what your perspective on it was, but just the excitement around what the brand was doing, the stable of athletes they've brought together, it was really, really cool to see it kind of from the ground level.
Yeah, I think the right word you used was investment, right? And I think it's just like a huge step for a brand to step in literally and create an elite group and like invest in track and field, right? Because that's what we really care about. And the athletes that they're pouring resources into shows that they are not messing around, right? We've seen shoe brands dance around the elite kind of space, but no, like On is like planting the flag literally, and getting into it and investing and challenging themselves for sure. I think it was cool because we were kind of brought into this project through the Running Network, and we should give a quick shout out to Andy Weeding for kind of coming up with the script and helping us be a part of this project. So we went out to Portland and we got to go to a studio. Everyone had masks on. We were it was a challenge at some times to film under COVID circumstances, but we got it done. Really stoked to be a part of it. And I gotta say, Ryan, like I've been holding like Minnesota knowledge, like the amount of people who have asked me in the Twin Cities if I know who Joe Klecker has signed with over the past 3 months, I can't even count anymore. So now we can finally triumphantly say where he landed. And I just want to run through this roster of all the athletes they signed because it's a really solid opening bunch. Joe Klecker, Carlos Villarreal, Oliver Hoare, Jordy Beamish, Alicia Monson, Leah Fallon, Alicia Konyatrek, and Emily Oren, a really solid kind of like diverse crew that has landed there in Boulder and is kind of ready to get after it.
Yeah, and I think back to one of our early episodes on the pod. We were talking to Keith Kelly from New Balance, and we asked him about brands investing during this pandemic and how a lot of brands are going to kind of sit on the sideline and not spend money because there's not a lot of money to be spent given the situation. But he also said this may be an opportunity for a brand. And, fast forward a few months and we were, who is it going to be? And On answers that question. And they answer it in a big way. It's not just, wow, they made this big signing and they got this athlete. No, we're starting with, a stable of 8+ athletes, a few national champs, some people that are really riding high coming out of the NCAA. And on top of that, they also add a coach in Dathan Ritzenhein. And, excited about that because obviously we have a relationship with Dathan that spans over the past decade plus through FlowTrack, but he's also one of the great runners over the last 20 years that, Americans and fans of the sport have really come to idolize and look for an inspiration. And he's a guy that comes in with a ton of knowledge as an athlete. He's been a coach now for kind of dabbled in coaching for a little bit and then got more into it over the last 6 years. And Dathan will provide some insight. He'll be one of our guests today that come on and talk to not only his journey in coaching, but his journey now in joining On and getting athletes on board and how that process looked. This episode, Alex, I mean, we actually get to provide the listeners with two aspects today. So it's kind of a double episode, double whammy, if you will, where we get to hear from our new coach, Dathan Ritzenhein. We also get to talk to Steve Dekoker, the global sports marketing manager at On, who came from Brooks, where the Brooks Beasts were formed, where Hanson's Brooks was formed, and a number of top talent. And he now comes with some experience and talks to us about that launch of this new team. And I mean, in all of the kind of the I guess the breadth and wealth of conversation we got to have between these two, it really gives some good insight onto the brand.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we provide both sides of the spectrum, right? Because yes, there's cost and investment, but then there's finding the right people to do it who have the experience to get things off the ground, right? And I think we as track and field fans, we are always rooting for new players in the game, and I think we really learn how you get a group, form a group, and then put some pillars to make it sustainable and hopefully a force moving forward.
So with that, I'm going to introduce our first of two guests today, Mr. Dathan Ritzenhein. And, for those that don't remember, I'm sure most of you do, U.S. Olympian, two-time Foot Locker champ, NCAA champ, former American record holder, has so many accolades that he is bringing to the table as a coach to help guide these athletes for this new club, the On Athletics Club. So let's have Dathan join us now. Dathan, welcome to the show, and good to see you. I have two quick questions to kick things off. Where are you now in the world, and what is going on with the wrist?
Thank you for having me. I am in Boulder, Colorado, actually at my new home in Niwot, Colorado, which is right outside Boulder. And the new home part, I pulled a lot of weeds and I sprained my wrist. I no longer train hard like a professional runner, so I started hurting other parts of my body.
Most of the folks don't get to enjoy us setting up the start of these conversations and making sure the connection's working and all this. But I actually just said to Dathan as we were getting technically sound here, this is the moment where it feels like we're becoming the old people in our world, in our sport,
Now
that you strain your wrist with pulling weeds, it really just cemented that.
Actually, there's a bunch of old ladies that were getting attacked by a mob of gangsters, and I stepped in.
Right. I know. I was expecting I was pacing and I was on the bike or I was on the elliptical and I fell. Nope.
Yeah, let's just say it's a fixer-upper here, and so I gotta, I had to get my hands dirty.
Nice. So, Dathan, you mentioned you're now you're settled back in Boulder and rocking officially rocking the OAC kid and that On logo.
Look at that.
And now that in the nice that nice bright yellow, I think. So it's safe to say that this project, now that it's been announced and people are able to see the roster, it's been in the works for a while. I gotta wonder, with all the moving and all the logistics involved, how hard has it been to keep this secret under wraps?
It's been a project. This is like the CIA right here. I mean, once you got inside the circle of trust, you were there, and if you did anything, you were cut off. So it's been a project, but it's been a couple months in the making, and it's been a lot of fun, and pulling the group together and letting the people in that needed to help us get everything created, and also our families and stuff like that. That's been a project for sure, but we've I think just letting it out is so exciting now, finally, after all this time. You don't move across the country easily without people knowing. So
well, especially in Boulder, where you're essentially a celebrity to the running circles. It's were you even able to go out for runs, or what sort of efforts did you go through to kind of keep your hat tucked low and keep the identity low?
the COVID has been helping us actually, because I walk
I
around with a
suppose.
mask, and then like it's I'm like a superhero, and now I've come out to save the day, I guess. But no, I think in Boulder it's maybe fairly well known within the circle. This was going on, I think, and we just had a lot of people I think that were excited about it, and so we asked a lot of people just, hey, just let us put it together and be ready to kind of let it come on its own, and so yeah, we had to kind of just navigate it slowly and get a lot of things done, and I think a lot more people within the sport maybe knew, but yeah, we were excited to finally kind of let the cat out of the bag, and On is getting into the game big time, and so they're sponsoring this group, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and what we can do at the On Athletics Club is going to be great, hopefully, and we've signed on big names, and so to get all these guys to come here into town, kind of under the guise of like under the radar, it's been like the Manhattan Project. So.
You said it. There's a lot of excitement. What's most exciting about this for you?
Well, I think, right now there's a lot of our team roster is just, they're really good athletes that people are, coming out of school and want to know. We haven't had the signings and stuff just because of the situation, right? And so we're supposed to be having the Olympics, wrapping up here, and there's these great NCAA champions and these stars that are coming out and don't have, there's no announcements, there's no excitement like the normal. So I think that's what's exciting. I think we've invested in this team, and On's given us the opportunity to be able to really build this great program, and we literally are building it from the ground up. And so these athletes are going to be a part of it. They're going to be a part of building the team, and so I think that's exciting a lot for them to actually have their own teeth, skin in the game, or they say they get to be a part of molding something, which is going to be great.
Dathan, I want to maybe spin it back for, you mentioned the people, kind of the running circles maybe in Boulder, and the people in the know might have heard about, this sort of thing happening, but maybe taking a step back for the fan of Dathan Ritzenhein, who maybe, the last they heard, Dathan might run trials, and then Dathan was retired, and then now all of a sudden they're seeing you resurface as a coach. Can you maybe just give us a frame of reference for like how you have been splitting time between training and coaching over the last few years?
It's been a process for sure. I mean, now I'm 37, I guess now, so it's definitely something that I couldn't have done, before, when I was younger, when I was really focusing on my career. Because, I mean, even in the last couple of years, I started it was a slow process of starting to coach athletes more and more. From about 2014, it was when I started coaching, and just ever since then, like as I was going through, like when my time on the track was, I mean, that was so dedicated. You're spending months away, and so as I started doing more road racing, I was able to do a little bit more, and I started out coaching, helping Andy Powell at U of O, and then I went and helped at Grand Valley State University, D2 national champions back in Michigan, and then I slowly just started coaching more post collegiates, and so it was a slow process. But to tell you the truth, the last couple months working with the team, I mean, I couldn't have kept running and done this either. Like it's just I was on zero sleep. Let's just say the last month. I'm recharged now, because I was burning fumes to try to get this all happening and under wraps too. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I trained like a madman, like a crazy person, and so I don't do that anymore. So I need to put this energy into something else.
Dathan, I'm curious, when you made the final decision to officially, retire personally from competitive running, do you think that decision was made easier once you saw the opportunity to coach? Or, is there a situation where if you didn't have coaching, in front of you, you might still be competing right now?
Yeah, well, I was given the opportunity to keep competing, which was great. Keith and Kevin Hansen, like I had a contract to continue going if I wanted to, but at the same time, I mean, honestly, my body was completely a wreck. I could do good long runs, but I have like a really bad arthritic condition in my big toe joint. I could barely work out, like anymore. And Keith and Kevin, they put a lot of faith in me and a lot into me. But I think they knew also, like, I mean, I was doing everything I could to get to that line at the Olympics, but the last 2 years were pretty tough from that standpoint. So I was ready to be done. And when this opportunity was there, it felt right. The timing was right too, because I said, I want to try to make that 2020 Olympic team, but literally I had nothing else after that. I didn't even think about anything else competitively. Like, that was the end for me anyway. And so, but this happened, I think, for a reason. And when On decided to start this club and thought of me to coach it, I was pretty honored to be able to just have that chance too.
When you look at kind of getting into coaching and getting to the point now where you're part of this launch of a team, like, looking back, where did you first have the idea coaching was something you wanted in your future, and then how did you actually take that first step to start?
Well, really. I mean, my career, I don't want to say it went in many parts, I guess. And so, but when I decided to stop running track, that was kind of the start of my career in coaching, I guess, because I really just focused entirely on that before. And so that evolution kind of happened around the end of right after 2013, the World Championships in the 10K, and it was a slow process, but like, that's when I first started working with any athletes at all. And so before that, I didn't have any coaching experience at all. And so when I had the chance I was living in Portland still, so I had the chance to drive down 3 days a week down to Eugene and be a volunteer assistant for University of Oregon, because Andy Powell was a good friend of mine. And so it was great. I mean, I started out, that's why I think I had too many, like, illusions about how great coaching was going to be, because I started out helping at U of O, where Andy was working with Ed Cheserek and Mac Fleet and Parker Stinson and Trevor Dunbar. These guys, we came out and they won indoor nationals and they won outdoor nationals, and a bunch of them won NCAA individual titles. I was like, this is great. I mean, I don't even have to run, and get to have that same, part of that success. And so I think that maybe gave me an illusion that it was a lot easier than it is either. So when I moved back to Michigan and I started helping out at Grand Valley State University, they had won national titles, individual and teams, and Jerry Baltus, the coach there, he was happy to have me, but it's different, like, it was so different. I mean, these guys work so much. It's amazing how much collegiate coaches work, and they were putting together a D1 type program on. They fundraised things, they hustled everything, and I was like, this is a lot more work, and and so helping their help, it helped me a lot, actually, because it's sometimes I think you learn more maybe learning something from Ed Cheserek. I mean, the guy's so good, so sometimes learning more from guys who were maybe not superstars in high school, like what they can do, what they can't do. And I mean, Jerry was a great coach. He was getting people running 149, and they didn't even run in high school, they barely, so like, getting to see that side of it was good for me. It kind of changed some of my own training philosophies, I think, as well. I still retain some of the things, because I think some things work differently for really high end people than, like, the more talent, like, there's different things you can do for sure. But it was maybe foundational for me, I think, to spend those years. And then I just started working more with post collegiates in the last couple of years, as people, I was racing a little less, and I was getting closer to the door. So, like, I had maybe a little bit more time, and then that was good. I mean, it's just good to have a broad range of things, I think, and that helped me for sure.
You talk about, Oregon to Grand Valley State, a D1 national champs, and significant focus on track and field and cross country there. Grand Valley State, obviously same, but at the D2 level, which is a different level than you would think at D1. So it draws a little bit of what seems to be maybe a parallel for you now, right? You look at when you talk to a lot of the groups out there and they compare their budget to about a Bowerman budget, without knowing your budget, I'm going to assume it's maybe different than some of these other teams, right? And so what did you see between Oregon and Grand Valley State, and how their resources were structured, and maybe what's similar here, but ultimately you still have the same goal of making Olympic teams?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I learned from Andy Powell, at U of O, is that what's probably the best thing, that like the number one thing for coaching is probably recruiting. Like, you got to have the best of the best, right? And at the end of the day, we have that coming out right away in the first year. I mean, Joe Klecker, Ollie, Carlos, Alicia Monson, my runners that I have coming in. We have a full roster already, and so it was hard for a couple of weeks, but at the same time, like we're not going to disclose the full budget here and stuff, but we invested in these athletes, and we saw an opportunity to, because it's the fastest growing running company in the world right now. And so they saw this as a launch pad to help build the brand more, to invest in athletes, and so we did that with this roster straight out the gate. And so now what we do with the rest of our budget, we'll be able to do everything we need for these guys. But at the end of the day, the men and women that we've recruited, they have the talent, and they have the talent to be the best in the world. I'm going to help them get there, and we have a company backing them, in a club that's going to give them that opportunity. And so whether we're the best funded group in the country or we got to scrap our way to it, it doesn't matter now, because we have the people, and we're going to give them enough of the opportunity. They have to actually step out and do it, and I have to get out there and help them do it. And so at the end of the day, no one's going to do it for you. It doesn't matter how much money you got, how many gadgets you have, things like that. Like, we have to train hard, we have to be smart, we have to create a good culture, and we have the base for that now. And so but they'll have every opportunity still.
Dathan, I definitely want to lean into the specific roster you have, and we'll come back to that. But I'd love to get a little bit of a lens. You started to talk about that perspective that you got from Powell, and then also from your experience at Grand Valley State. And I think that's really, to have that perspective of two completely different tiers is important. And that's from kind of like a coaching and recruiting and administrative background. But I think you're unique, and especially your experience is unique as an athlete, because you've had you've had different coaches, and it's probably safe to assume that those coaches all had relatively different philosophies and approaches to the sport. I'd love to get an insight from you, maybe working backwards from Keith and Kevin, of what are the certain philosophies that you learned from them that you think are going to influence your overall kind of coaching trajectory?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I didn't bounce around. I just, at different phases in my career, I went different directions. And so, coming out of high school, I just did a lot, like, at the end of the day, like, so it was maybe reckless, crazy training. I think I raced 78 times in high school, like, it was nuts. But, like, and I probably had a lot of injuries and stuff related to that. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot too, for sure. Like, younger athletes, aerobically developed people versus people who aren't, like, that was helpful for sure. It's just at the time, I was a young kid and I wanted to do more all the time, and I didn't listen to anything the coach said. And I probably was like that for a lot of my career, actually. And so I think that's important to me. Maybe that's the one thing, is that getting those getting the kids to trust me as a coach is important. Like, and And it's not that I didn't trust my high school coach, but like I just was stubborn and wanted to do more, like so harnessing that. And we've given all these athletes, like their contracts, we've given them the ability like to be able to focus on their training and hopefully they listen to me, and then they'll avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made, but so. And then when I went to college, I wanted that. At the time, like the Running with the Buffaloes had just come out, and Adam Goucher had won the NCAA title, and Kara had been there, and then I went on my recruiting trip, and Jorge and Eduardo Torres are there, and Steve Slattery, and so, but Mark Wetmore was an enigma to, like he was, he never called me. I mean, everybody else, like I got phone calls the first day, like in college, and Mark didn't even send me the letter. The assistant coach did, and it said, "You're probably getting recruited by everybody, so we won't waste your time if you're not interested. But here's our number." So I had to call them, and
it's a sales tactic.
Yeah, it is a sales. I
know. This sells itself, this program, but it really did once I got there, and Mark's program was kind of instrumental to me because it was the first. It was my first glimpse into what I would consider like real solid training theory. Like Mark was a hardcore disciple of Arthur Lydiard, and so there was some adaptation to the NCAA system for sure. But I really found that to be very. I believed in that. It was intriguing to me, and so that was pretty important to me. And I would say a lot of my training, like that we do. There's definitely components. There's workouts. All the coaches I've had, there's workouts in there that have just been stolen from those coaches. Like it's just maybe in different doses, different timing, things like that. But Mark was pretty instrumental in that aspect, and so my personality is probably a lot different than Mark. I'm very, maybe more outgoing and things like that. But Mark was good at making you, as a coach, he was good at making you feel like it was you and him versus the world, and that was something that was important, like he was maybe not like very vocal about it or obvious, but you felt it when he said something to you, it meant something. And so I always try to remember that, like don't just spout stuff, like what you say, the athletes will feed off from for sure. And so, but then, like there was a lot of aerobic development, but like I do more year-round speed development probably, but at the same time, I do take a lot of those early aerobic foundational things pretty seriously too. And so when I went after college, my first coach, Brad Hudson, was really into Renato Canova's training. And I learned a lot about the marathon from him, about fueling, about, that stuff. I do keep some of that in there, but maybe I think that it's a little shortened probably than some of the stuff I did with Brad. But it was still important for me to kind of go through that period of time. I think I learned a lot. And then when I went to Alberto, I mean, there was so much speed and it was year round. And so it's something I keep, but there's definitely a lot more of an aerobic component, I think, to some of the training that I did. I mean, I always did hard long runs there. But I do a lot more threshold work, I think, maybe throughout from week to week than we did. But a lot of the workouts I've taken right out of his book, I mean, and they worked really good for certain type of runner. And I think we have on our team a lot of runners that thrive on that kind of training as well. And so then when I went to Keith and Kevin, I mean, it was much different because for me at that point in my career, I was trying to focus completely on the marathon and their bread and butter, definitely longer aerobic intervals. And so I think it works well for some people that's why they have a lot of success with people that come out of college that have room for growth because there's a lot of aerobic gains still to be made. And so, truthfully, the thing that I learned more from Keith and Kevin was really about like investing in their athletes as people, like very good people. I mean, there's not many people in the sport who are more generous, than those guys. And so I really take that to heart a lot because it meant a lot to me at that point in my career that someone would still want to invest in an old athlete that, a lot of people thought was over the hill. And I did run, I had the fastest time in the country in the half marathon one year. I mean, I trained really well, and I wish I could have done more, but my body started to fail in certain parts, but they stayed solid to me the entire time. So that's something I took away from them.
Don't sell yourself short here, Dathan. There's some people on this podcast that some of their fondest memories of or getting inspired to running was seeing you run late night over in Europe, that 5K. That's something I'll never forget. But I'd love to.
That was epic.
I'd love to. You even mentioned, Dathan. The workouts are all the same, and that's they're not the exact same, but I think it's really fun for us as fans of the sport to try to categorize philosophies and, kind of put coaches in a specific box, right? But as you mentioned, a lot of the workouts are the same, and you essentially, move through them just to accompany the phases in your life. So if we know if the training theories are relatively available and approachable, what is that common thread though that makes a coach stand out? And you also got to see it from a team perspective with Powell. And so I'm just wondering, there is an intangible, a thread that goes outside of training and philosophy and kind of workouts. And what do you see as that kind of intangible, and how do you bring it to this new squad?
I mean, a lot of people think that there's a magic, formula that you can, you have to know, some physiology, and you have to have read and studied some things for sure. You can't be, you can't just have my grandma come do it. But at the same time, at the end of the day, the athlete has to believe in themselves. They have to believe in the training. And so a lot of what, a lot of it is just reading how they're doing, what do they need at this period of time? How are they looking physically? But that's going to change how they are doing mentally too. And if they believe in themselves, they step on the line. I know all the times that I ran great, my coach just made me believe that I was ready, and made me believe in what I could do on that race day, because this is what always goes, first. It doesn't matter, at the end of the day, you quit up here first. It almost always. I've had a few times maybe where I almost ended up in the gutter, but at the same time, it's almost always here. And the coach has to make you believe. And so now with that said, you have to have a solid training theory so that they're not in the tank or they're injured. Those things happen sometimes, and some of it's learning an athlete. Everybody's a little different, but the more time you have with them, you make a smart plan. You put them in the right situation when they're prepared and ready. And then when the bad things happen, you have to know what to do. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of those bad things happen. I've injured everything that you could injure, I sprained my tooth once, and those were never good things. Yeah, it was.
This was through running?
No, chewing. But, but there is, you got to learn from those things, right? Don't chew on, a bad tooth, but you have to learn from every mistake. And I tell you, I made mistakes I had a 16-year professional career. I won NCAA titles and Olympic teams and American records and world championship medals. But there was a lot of times where you're just sweating and hating life on the bike, staring at the wall, and, sometimes you can do little things, right, to get over those things faster. But a lot of times you just, you have to just scrap it and come back to a good plan again. And so, hopefully we avoid those things as much as possible. But when the bumps in the road happen, I've been there and I've done that, and I have empathy for athletes in that situation too. And so a lot of times, not all good runners make coaches, for sure, because sometimes they're just used to, it comes easy to them. So how do you empathize with someone it doesn't come easy to? So I like those athletes to know it didn't come easy to me. I screwed up a lot, and I know what you're going through at that moment right now. And so we're going to come up with the best plan for you. And trust me, I'm here. like now I get paid for this. I can't get out of this. Like, so, I'm here for you, like, and so I need them to know that. And so I think that's important, and it's a relationship that's built as well. It doesn't happen overnight. I think a lot of people think that they could just pick up and coach, and some people might have the knowledge to do it, but at the end of the day, professional running, I've been there, and it's different too. And there's a lot of things that come along with just other than just the training. You have to navigate meet directors and agents and sponsors and all that stuff too. And I know what it's like. And so I want them to know that aside from the training, aside from getting them ready and putting them in a good situation, I know what they've been through too. And so I think that that's something maybe that I can hopefully give these guys to help them be better. And if these men and women can come out here every day and train hard, when the bad stuff happens, I'll be there and I'll help you get through it too.
Yeah, Dathan, I think it's you mentioned, having them, you have to believe in the coach, and the athletes have to believe in you. And I think you're in a really interesting situation now where you are bringing on some athletes that you were, kind of working with, but you're also taking on some athletes that you haven't worked with before. You take Alicia, Ollie, Carlos, Joe, they've all been like on fire, and their careers are moving in an upward trajectory. And now you're asking them to trust you, right? So how do you get an athlete to believe in you?
Well, the hardest part about the last couple months has been, this is what everybody is like. I mean, everybody is at a different spot. Like with COVID stuff, some people were completely off. Some people were in the shape of their life. Some people were were hurt coming in. Some people, literally people from every different direction. So my brain is spinning like crazy. I'm like trying to line these people up in some way, but also we didn't even know what was going to happen from week to week. So that has been a puzzle for sure. And but I am happy to say that I think everybody's healthy, right now, and knock on wood, that's one thing. Some people are really, really fit, and some people are just getting into fitness. But I think, we had a mini camp, here in town where we had everybody come together because people were coming from every direction. Some people might not move permanently until after the racing season that we have, a couple opportunities that we might have. But, we had to get everybody together to say, this is going to be a team, start to get to know each other. Trust me. Coaching over the phone is just, writing training plans is not coaching, that's at the end of the day, like writing training plans might be part of coaching, but it's not coaching. And so I really had to be here, and On gave me the opportunity to maybe just do it remotely initially, at least. And when I talked to my wife and we had the opportunity to move, we were lucky our house sold like super fast. We bought a house here. So I can't believe how fast it happened. It really felt meant to be. But it wouldn't have been easy to do it otherwise. Like I just, getting people together and getting in the situation would have been so hard. And so I think that's probably been the biggest obstacle for sure. And, I'll make mistakes along the way for sure. But so far we at least have got a good groove started anyway.
So we asked about kind of your perspective from the coaches you've had and what you'll take from them. And you went into kind of some of the experiences you had as an athlete and some of the challenges you faced and, errors you maybe felt you made or whatever it might be. An athlete comes to you, one of your athletes, right, out of college, has been super successful, very similar, to what you were coming out of college, a very successful athlete coming from a really, really high-powered program. They say to you, Dathan, looking back now, like what was something you would have done differently as an athlete? Do you have an answer for that?
Well, I would say if they're with the On Athletics Club, that they have an opportunity now that maybe I didn't have. I was always fortunate, except for 6 months in my career, to have a contract that allowed me to race and to train. But I think what we have is unique. truthfully. And I think that we give those athletes an opportunity to be the best they can be, without giving them too much pressure. Like they're already under pressure. Like, trust me, like the best athletes, they put so much pressure on themselves. It's amazing. And so now we want them to run well, obviously, but we're giving them a chance to start in a way where they can basically tip their toe in, and we're getting things started, and we're not putting a clock on you saying you have to race in this time, otherwise that contract is up, things like that. We're not doing that. We're saying we want you to race well. These are your incentives. Go make this brand great, and help us innovate. Because that's what we're doing. Like, I mean, we're adapting this brand. Like, we're still in the process of. I mean, the owners of this company are really involved. I mean, like the founder of the company, Olivier, he still is involved in the R&D, and he's like, I want this team to be part of that, and so it's a very exciting, prospect for I think these athletes, and so we're kind of, I'm going to tell those athletes, sign with On, and you're going to have solid support. It's going to be there, and so I'm excited to offer that to people in this group that we have. But also to be part of, being able to offer that to athletes in the future too.
And I just kind of want to unpack that a little bit. What you said, you said the opportunity that they have with On is different than when you came out. And some people might say, well, man, Dathan was one of the best. He must have had opportunity. But you can speak to your scenario specifically, but I'm just thinking back to 04, 05, the opportunity to be with a team and a group. It didn't, that wasn't as abundant as it was today. So can you explain the differences?
That's true. You're right. There's been a shift and a change in the, people within the industry know that, I guess. When I came out in 2004, there was an era of big contracts if you were a superstar, but there was the Hansons, and I think Zap was around, maybe Team Minnesota, things like that. But it was not super well funded. Like today we have all these top level groups, right? And that didn't exist. Now, maybe some of the top end big money has been shifted away so that there's support within the groups, but that's also created maybe a misconception, I think, because there is maybe some old, like information out there about how much contracts are worth and stuff. So sometimes that can be maybe skewed a little bit. But I was fortunate because I came out and I had this story and I was a superstar on the rising, all that stuff, that I had a great contract coming out. And I could self-fund all the things that we offer in our group now, because of that. And some athletes could do that now. It just it doesn't really exist quite the same as it did then. It's not necessarily bad because I literally had to do everything myself. Like I had to schedule my own massage, my own strength training, my own facilities, all those things I had to do myself. And that's part of the things I screwed up on. I mean, I was doing stuff that I think, if I had to look back, I would be like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know. Now I get worked on, I get worked on towards the end of my career 5 times a day or 5 times a week. Whereas early on, I just would get some massage sometimes, or I would do the worst strength training you've ever seen. I probably just, it's just stuff that I don't know where I learned this stuff, but it's changed and evolved to this, now. And so I think the groups can offer that. And we've seen it. Like, look how good we are in the US, like in the US, middle distance running is so good. It's amazing. When in 2004, I limped my way onto the Olympic team because no one was that good. And so now it's just so hard. And we have a very internationally diverse team. And so that's something I'm excited about. Because some groups, like it's just something that's unique to our group. We have people who can help each other out, and if they're standing on the Olympic final together and that's the only time they raced, then great, but like they're going to help each other every day in practice. Like I didn't have that coming out of school. I had to kind of piece together. Now I had great training partners, but they were friends. it's just like everything else. I pieced together my training partners from people I knew, not based on the most talented people that might help me get better either.
Dathan, I mentioned the getting athletes to believe in you a little bit ago, but I'm going to add another element into this pie. You're giving props to the kind of like the fundamentals and the structure of how On is bringing this team together. But first, you have to get an athlete to believe in you, and now you also have to get them to believe in a brand and a shoe that they've probably never worn. Like, how do you get an athlete who has probably never put an On shoe on their foot to sign on and join this team and commit to representing them for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think part of the footwear landscape has definitely changed, right? Like it matters for sure. I think when I first signed my contract, it didn't matter that my first contract back, coming out of college, it didn't matter that much. I mean, it was what's cool, what looks good, right? But it's like you got to go in armed to the teeth now, in some of these things. And what we've done to be able to sell these athletes on to believe in that brand is we actually have. I mean, some of these athletes talk to the owners of the company. You can't call up Phil Knight. You can't say, hey, you're not getting him on the line. We actually had them talk to these guys and say, and they want their input. It's not like some other companies might want to see what the results are. They actually want to know what you say. I mean, just signed Jake Riley, who's coming out of, he's going to be on assuming the Tokyo happens, he's on that team. I mean, he made it happen, and he's telling these guys, this is what needs to be done in these shoes. So they actually want the input from the athletes. So I tell the athletes this: if you want to be part of what we're building, you want to have a voice in this, On will let you do that. We will help you be a better athlete, and you will help us make better product. And so it started as an innovation off from injuries that Olivier had, and it turned into the fastest growing running company in the world the last 10 years. I mean, Roger Federer has bought part of this company basically, he's involved in this company now. Like, this is one of the best athletes in the world. And I think one thing we know about the Swiss, they don't do anything bad. The Swiss do not do anything bad. It's like if you wanted, that's like authentic to their to them as this company On Running is very Swiss. They love the international flair that our team has brought, but they want to create the best product. And so there's a reason why, though, that it has a very big following, but it's expanding the training gear, the racing shoes. All this is expanding as fast as the company is too, and so that's exciting. And I think a lot of athletes, that's something that they are excited about too, and that's kind of how that's part of the reason I think we've been able to sign the people we have.
I assume there's no bias in your view of the Swiss after that great 5K in Zurich a few years ago.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
That's our second. That's our second reference this podcast to that race.
I'm 10% Swiss just from that. So, actually, the Ritzenheins do hail from the Alps. So that's so.
There's a deeper connection than we realized.
That's right. That's right.
In terms of selling athletes and on coming to the brand and to the team, and then there's also another kind of sale of this whole thing, and that's selling the idea of a team for a brand, right? And we got to talk to Steve Dekoker and understand some of the dynamics around that idea and pitching that idea, your involvement in being a part of that, and he told us a story about getting this off the ground and talking about who's going to be the coach and talking to Olivier about, who this is going to be. And they weren't sure how that decision around coaching was going to be made, but there was a conversation that you had with the CEO. And he said, after that conversation, he's like, I don't know what Dathan said, but that was it. He was sold. The group was moving forward and things were rolling. So I'm curious, what was that conversation, and how did you sell on Dathan and this team?
I just must have been authentic because I don't remember saying anything so ground shattering. But I think the biggest thing that, I had known Steve from before, from my time, with Hanson's. I knew him a little bit, and we had some conversations just about my coaching in general, but nothing specific, right? And so when I found out Steve had taken the job at On, I just, as a friend, said, "Hey, congratulations," and we connected shortly thereafter. But when yes, I wasn't like preordained to be the coach of this group for sure. But when I talked to Olivier, it's like probably 10 o'clock at night in Zurich. We're doing a Zoom call during the middle of a pandemic, and I could tell right away too. I just had a connection with Olivier, and I think a lot of that is what matters. Like even the group, like you have to create a culture and a connection. And like when I talked to Joe, was the first athlete that we signed, that that connection was there, and it was easy, you could say, because of the CU connection, and we maybe have a lot of parallels with work ethic and things like that. But truthfully, all the athletes, you have to have this connection. You have to believe in it. And I think when Olivier and myself talked, I think he wanted it to happen. He just had to have the right parts. And so I'm just happy. I'm honored that he saw that in me. I think we maybe have the same wavelength on some things, because I'm excited to work with him, and I'm excited to. I know the athletes they talk to him, and like I say, it's 10 o'clock at night, and he's wanting to talk to the athletes. He's got a big company to work for, but he's excited about it. And when you have that excitement from the top, it comes down. It trickles down into the rest of the team and the rest of everybody. And I can tell that in the last month as we've been here at camp, the excitement is there. And it's from the home base in Zurich all the way to Boulder here. There's excitement and energy about what we're doing, and we can't wait to have this thing out there and this thing out there, on people's chest racing. I know that's across the board.
Dathan, you mentioned, a huge element of coaching is recruitment. And I'd love to, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's look forward to, end of NCAA cross country season next year. Olympic trials is about to go down. Let's say a kid's coming out of school and he's looking at groups, and across the board, this has probably never happened, but let's say across the board, money is the exact same, right? What sells someone on joining OAC?
Well, I can tell you, we've signed people where money wasn't as good, but they wanted to be part of the team too. So first of all, I don't think that if you're an athlete, you feel free to, I think that you should be informed, right? So talk to your college coach, first, and explore all your options. But having anybody that we've signed mostly has had agents, right? It's a weird world to navigate. But I would talk to a lot of people. I would talk to friends, because when I came out, I knew nothing. I could have been talked into anything probably. But I'll be very upfront and honest. We've got people that we've talked to that we haven't signed yet that I would love to sign still, and we have a list of people that we're excited for that are coming out this next year too. And so if they're excited, I don't want to pull the old Mark Wetmore thing, but those people are probably, everybody's interested in them, so we won't waste your time, kind of thing, like he told me. But my door is open, I'll say, to any athlete out there. So you can send me a message. I'm happy to respond.
We just disclosed your tactic.
Yes. So I will talk to anybody, but I will tell you the real straightforward, honest. There's been some hard conversations, to tell you the truth, from people who wanted to be in our group that we couldn't give them anything yet. We couldn't give them the right situation, and that's hard. We had a few people that we recruited. I took a couple of them really hard, to tell you the truth, because we put a lot into it, and I thought they would be great. But you win some and you lose some, and you have to be able to move on, and you have to be able to then focus. And truthfully, we've got some people that I'm super excited about that we wouldn't have got otherwise either, like, and so I just have to know, like, that's part of the process, I think. But I do wish those, like I say, when you put a lot into an athlete and you start to get to know them a little bit, and then it feels like they're breaking up with you or something like that, and but so you gotta, but I like to think that that I just look forward to seeing them still do well, I guess, nevertheless, and we'll put together our core group, and it's going to be good no matter what. So.
Well, Dathan, I think it's been fun for us to see the birth of a new brand, and we're always excited for kind of new creativity and new resources being pumped into the sports. We're excited about that, but I think we're all just as happy for you and your fam to be able to move back to Boulder, and we're excited to see all the learnings that you've taken over the last few years, and all these coaches to see where it takes you, and to see what sort of wisdom you impart into some of these athletes. And I hope now that the word is out that people don't come banging down your door too much in Boulder.
Hey, that's all right. They can follow us. I'm more than happy. We're here to create inspiration. I think we are going to try to help inspire people to be better and to be faster, to get the most out of themselves. The On Athletics Club it's new in town, but hopefully it's here to stay. And I think that we're going to have some big results soon, hopefully. But we're going to have a team that's exciting, with a company that's really exciting and growing. And hopefully we grow that following too, by giving them something authentic. So thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thanks, Dathan.
Cool. Dathan, thanks so much, man. We'd like to welcome Mr. Steve Dekoker to the show. And we are actually, this is one of our first ever in-person podcasts, which is interesting during COVID time. We're in actually Portland, Oregon, on the corner of Thurman and 24th Ave.
Right.
Sitting outside of Cha Cha Cha.
Yep.
Our goal was to go to the Dragonfly Coffee House, but it was a little crowded, and we saw empty space across the road, and that's where we came. So, Steve, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Me. I'd just like to know this is the earliest I've ever had a margarita in my life. Well, I believe it's 11:30 a.m.
We have pictures of margarita here to kick off this podcast, and talk to Steve about everything that On Running has going on, a launch of a new team. Steve, for you, over the last few months, a launch of a new job at a new company that's trying to make some big splash in North America. So before we get into all that, first, how are things right now at On, and for you moving from Seattle and Brooks just at the beginning of this pandemic to where we are today, sitting here with masks?
Yeah. I mean, strange times for sure for everybody, particularly for my family. You're a new job in the middle of this whole pandemic, moving family across states, doing all that stuff in the middle of this. In some ways, it's kind of a good timing to, be making some of those decisions. But it's been strange. I think I've met 3 new colleagues in the flesh at this point. It was, it's been almost all Zoom meetings. I mean, hours and hours and hours of Zoom meetings. But, even before this, there was a lot of, HQ is in Switzerland and Zurich. So that was a part of the game to begin with. So they were set up pretty well for it. But we do have some team stuff happening in the next few weeks where I think there's going to be some spaced, like in-person engagements, team building stuff, but all very much, around some of the rules and guidelines. So safety first. But it's been interesting. But I feel like everyone has a story with this time and space. So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about starting a new job at this time and moving to a different city and not meeting your coworkers and the folks maybe above you or your team that you're managing, and then on top of that, launching a huge initiative remotely. So it's very interesting. I mean, in terms of On itself and the business, how are they doing right now during all this time? I mean, you hear people are running, people are buying bicycles. I hear, a lot of this activity, but On
Where are they at in all this?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually talked to a friend that works at Cannondale the other day, and they can't. It's like they can't make bikes fast enough right now. They literally can't make them. Well, yeah. I mean, there's kind of a second running boom happening. I mean, a lot of people, running is therapy for them. Running is something you can do individually. Especially if you're cooped up in your house all day. And so, On is definitely it helps to be kind of in this sole vertical of running and not have all these other sports that really you can't participate in right now. So they're really benefiting, and they had a lot of momentum. I should say we had a lot of momentum going into all this, and so that's just continued. Year over year results are really positive, and I've been able to continue to invest in the sport in a time where most companies are really divesting, cutting. You hear contracts, layoffs happening, contracts being cut. That's. I'd love to say that I foresaw that, and that was why I made the decision. But I think it's more just luck than anything. But certainly a positive place to be right now with all this going on. So yeah.
Can we just say? So I think On is this kind of upstart from an American perspective, but for maybe somebody who's totally unfamiliar with On, never heard of it, just maybe heard of them in the murmurs, why is On different? What is the differentiator of On compared to a brand that like some of these other upstart brands that we've seen over the last couple of years? What makes On special?
Yeah.
And how old are they? Are they upstart?
So On is 10 years old. We were actually supposed to have a global sales meeting in Sardinia, of all places, about a month ago. Didn't happen for obvious reasons, but it was started in 2010. So it's a baby in terms of in the industry space, and it was started by these three Swiss men. One of them, Olivier Bernhard, was a pro triathlete for 13 years, and he had 5 or 6 different sponsors. I've had a lot of meetings with Olivier, and really cool guy. But the root of it is he was really, as in his later years, he was having trouble competing in a lot of the available running product at the time, and he was a lot of injuries. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a Bowerman-esque. He just decided, well, I'm going to fix this for myself. And so the story is he actually cut parts of a water hose up and glued them to the bottom of an old Nike shoe. I mean, I'm not kidding. They have photos of this thing. It looks like what you think it looks like, right? But you run on this thing, and he's like, "Oh, this provides some responsiveness and cushioning that I need." And then, I mean, if you look at an On shoe now, there's some similarities with the Cloud Tech, and it's this, very visual technology. And actually, my first experience with the brand was, I was in New York probably a year ago, and I went to the Jackrabbit in Columbus Circle. And, it's just, I'll do this infrequently, I was just at Boulder Running Company, for instance, just kind of checking out the industry and what's going on, and saw this wall of this new product, and the technology is so visible. You think about when Nike Air first came out, and we were all probably like middle school, high school at the time, and you're like, oh man, I mean, that's just, what is that? And it's just air in a pocket, right? And, and they've made a brand out of it, but On has this very visual technology, so you see it on the wall, and I remember thinking, whoa, what is that? And it was intriguing, and in some ways it looks a little gimmicky, and I definitely had that incredulity, initially, but then I also thought the product was just really sharp looking, really, really aesthetically, good looking stuff, and so that was kind of the first just these guys, and I think
this is while you were at Brooks still.
Yeah, and in that, wearing that hat, I'm thinking as a threat. I'm like, these guys. I'm trying to think in my mind of all the reasons they won't make it, right?
Right.
Because I mean, how many people have tried to either get back into running or start in running and just failed? There's a reason it's so hard to be a legitimate player in running. Good running product is incredibly difficult to make, and then to sustain that. So anyway, that was my first encounter, and then the truth of it is, it's gonna get loud here for a second. The truth of it is, they're a 10-year-old company. They've been the fastest growing running brand in the industry for a decade straight. And really most of the roots up to this point have been in Europe. I mean, they're the number 1 brand in Switzerland for obvious reasons, number 2 brand in Germany, you can think of another brand that might be big there, but in Europe it's quite large and it's growing. And there's if a lot of people probably heard of On via the Roger Federer connection, which he's now an investor in the brand and kind of
Obviously an avid runner as well.
Well, he does run actually quite a bit, but he's the Swiss, it's a small-ish country, and they're everyone kind of knows each other, and it's and it's all these just premium brands. And that's the other thing with On is it's if you look them up online, it's not cheap product. It's very much in the premium space. But it's very high quality stuff, and but you're not going to find it in all retail. So that's another reason. It's specialty shops is really the focus now and growing in those spaces. But so yeah.
I think it's funny when one of the things that On pushes is, and you see it all over the website, is Swiss engineering. But the origin story is a guy who slapped pieces of garden hose onto the bottom of the shoe. Like, oh, so that's Swiss engineering.
No, exactly. But everyone's got to start somewhere, right? And now you look at other brands, and McLaren is a Swiss brand, Formula One, really respected. Omega, Rolex. Those are the circles. But certainly the product has evolved to being really legitimate now, and and I've been running into stuff. In fact, when I was kind of just making the decision, can I do this? Can I move the family? Am I, is this job, realistic? I actually went and did my longest run ever. I did a 37-mile. I ran from my house in Seattle to my parents' house, which is in a suburb. It was 37 miles away, and my wife thought it was crazy. But it was the beginning of COVID. And and everyone and I was kind of training for some.
If I'm gonna get injured, this is the time.
Well, exactly. Well, and I was training for some ultra stuff, and I thought, what the hell? Like, I'm gonna put these shoes on. I'm gonna grab a couple gels, maybe I think I held a water bottle or something. The good news is my legs, the shoes were great. My legs were great. I had bonked multiple times, hardcore. Made it to my parents' house, it was supposed to be this big family meal, and I ended up just crashing on the couch for 3 hours. So validated the shoes, though, I guess is the point of the story. But yeah.
So it's interesting because I think I want to talk about the team launch and some parallels that you had, but you have some parallels even outside of building a new team, in that when you were at Brooks kind of went through that surge of becoming what really it's known for now, as it was years ago when I was growing up and going through college. It was kind of that you go to the doctor, they'd tell you get to the Brooks, and then all of a sudden back then I think ASICS was always the king of specialty, and then all of a sudden Brooks started charging, and now it sounds like On is the brand in the running industry that's having a big push. So coming from a company that went through a push of its own to get to the top, at least this from the specialty side, to now a brand that's also surging.
Yeah.
What do you see in comparison or differences?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the smart brands realize that you have to be authentic in the sport and in the space. And when you look at specialty run, that's where people in the sport, that's where high school coaches and employees are generally ex-collegiate runners, or people that have some sort of equity in the sport. And I just think it gives you credibility and to go out and sell in kind of the more massive distribution channels and things like that. And so Brooks got that really early on, and they get a lot of credit for the hustle and just the strategy there. And I think, but not everybody seems to be able to replicate it. There's certainly been brands that have tried that. And so, yeah, and the other thing is premium, right? Specialty is pretty premium. There's not a lot of low price point stuff there. And so you're going in there to get a quality pair of shoes. It's not necessarily a big box store where, you could, buy a $30, $40 pair of shoes. It may break in half through your second run. But, so I think, yeah. And then, Brooks certainly, did it the right way, so there's a model to look after. I think On's trying to chart their own path, but they're also trying to be they're picking key retailers to partner with that are going to support the premium model, that are going to help show the product in the right way. This isn't just a On, for instance, isn't on Amazon right now. That's a very strategic decision, and it's they're trying to control their brand and how the brand is is sold and viewed by people in the public. And so I'm not one of the people making those decisions, but they brought me in to, really stamp some authentication into the sport, specifically with, pro athletes and, high school and college age, more or less the people that you guys are speaking to with this podcast.
Yeah. You made me think of what my last Amazon purchase was.
Is there a world where somebody could also justify? We talk about being in premium retailers, right? And On is a premium product. But is there, to play devil's advocate, does that also bar you from reaching a larger core audience?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And look, I'm not, once again, this isn't, it's a little bit above my pay grade, but, I don't make those decisions. I kind of support them. But yeah, I think we all, Alex, you've worked in this world, and Ryan, you have enough connections there that you understand it. We all want, those of us that are fans of the sport, want kids at all levels, particularly with today's climbing culture and talking about people of different genders and races, and we want as many people participating in the sport as possible. We all want the sport to grow, and that means price point is a limiting factor for a lot of folks. So that's one of the things I'm trying to help problem solve from a sports marketing is maybe we can't lower. Maybe we're not going to make cheap product, but maybe we can have ways to get product on people's feet whether it's free or it's some sort of incentive that reach certain communities that aren't getting exposure. And so nothing specific there right now, but that's certainly something that weighs on me because just trying to be socially conscious and trying to reach out and make sure people have good. The reality is running is a pretty simple sport, but if you can't afford to buy running shoes, that's a limiting factor. And if we think running long term is a healthy life choice for people, it makes you live a happier, healthier life in so many ways, then why don't we try to get more people in running shoes that maybe can't afford it, so that, the sport can grow, because that's ultimately is why I've stuck in this industry so long. So
definitely a healthy lifestyle. We ran Forest Park this morning. I can't say I was happy for the first 3 miles of climbing today, but I definitely felt healthy. It was great to stop and enjoy the scenery, and then start going downhill. I'd like to, talk a little bit about this team that you guys are launching, the On Athletics Club, and to kind of get us there. Your path at Brooks started in 2004, just out of college, and right around the time the Hanson's Brooks team was launched at Brooks. And the Hansons was the thing. I think Brooks saw it, and maybe you can kind of tell the story of how that kind of came to be with Brooks and where you think.
Yeah, so at the time, Dave Larson was the VP of marketing at Brooks. Still good friends with Dave. He's head of tennis marketing for a long time at Nike, and just really creative guy. Really respect him and some of the choices he's made. But he had read this Wall Street Journal article that was about this new team in Michigan that was trying to beat the Kenyans in the marathon. And their whole model was, let's get back to, at the time, a lot of people had just kind of lone wolf athletes out training themselves. And, there's benefits in this, look at the NCAA and how successful that is. And, why aren't we doing a team thing? And so anyway, that was the whole, point of the article. And so Dave saw that and thought, we got to sponsor these guys. And so at the time, Jesse Williams, who's still a friend of mine and still in the sport and putting on meets and things, he was a tech rep, and so Dave hired Jesse to come over and manage this relationship, essentially start sports marketing over again at Brooks. I had been hired recently to manage some outlet stores, I was right out of Fairhaven Runners in Bellingham, working retail and getting a graduate degree and running red shirt track, and my wife and I were engaged, and so there's all these things happening. And so Jesse did a great job of building the roots there, and then I joined the team more or less because we were running buddies. And I remember one point we were running in San Diego, and I can't remember why we were there. I think it was US Cross Champs, and he was like, hey, I'm pitching for this new job, I think it'd be good for you. I think you should take it. It's probably a lateral move, but it's where you want to be anyway. And so I obviously jumped at that, and then long story short, Jesse moved on. I kind of took over sports marketing there for the last 3.5-ish years, and really was exposed to just kind of the industry and some of the more of the athlete-centric stuff, and kind of started to develop my own opinions and perspectives on how things should be done, so I've really taken some of those learnings with me to this new position. And so I don't know if you want me to talk about what we're doing now, but
well, what I think is interesting is that you look at Nike over the years has sponsored track and field and teams for a long time. While you were at Brooks, it was the budgets were probably not what the Nike team budgets were, and so to see, I think back to the rise of Brian Sell and the excitement around what he did, the success of Desi Linden, mm-hmm. the launch of the Brooks Beasts, and now where they're at and kind of the caliber of athletes that they have on the team. You kind of saw that path to success and the growth of a lot of those programs, and just curious, are there kind of influential points throughout that time being around that you saw that have kind of carried with you to now what you guys are starting with at On?
Yeah, I mean, there's these inflection points in anyone's career, right? And I think just in the sport as well. And to your point, it's tough being the big dogs, Audi, Nike in particular, because it's a numbers game with athletes, and you're kind of throwing mud at the wall, and there's a lot of reduction clauses, and you're trying to mitigate, the money you spend, so you're getting a return on that investment. Being a smaller brand, you have the disadvantage of you're not going to have all the top athletes, but you have the advantage of telling a smaller, more strategic story about your brand and using athletes in maybe a more unique way. And so I think we caught on to that pretty quickly at Brooks, and the Hansons were a great partner and still are. I mean, I have so much respect for Keith and Kevin Hansen, and I'm still good friends with those guys in what they've done for the sport in general, and a lot of money out of their own pockets. But Brian Sell, Des Linden are both products of the program, and those guys get so much of the credit for that, and mostly just having a model for post-collegiates who neither of those athletes were probably going to get a pro deal out of school, but that was a launch pad for them both to have. I mean, Brian, such a cool story, and he kind of decided to pull the plug in his career, and hung out with him this in Atlanta last year, and I guess in February, not last year, but
seems like a long time
still
ago.
Love that guy, and he's just such a cool dude, and he went out on his own terms, but when everyone saw him make that team in 2008 and beat he beat Meb, he beat Canucci in that race. People forget he beat Down Brown. People forget the scalps he took to make that team. Canucci was coming off. He was the American record holder by minutes at the time. And then obviously Des Linden. I'd actually taken over the head role months before the Boston 18, and to be there, and she was in the prototype shoe that we were working on at the time, and won it in those crazy conditions, and wasn't frankly in her best fitness even, and but you want to see a brand like explode and change overnight. The amount of media coverage you win. We've always said winning Boston is bigger than a gold medal. It just is, because what Boston means to the casual runner, especially in this country. Boston is the Olympics for most people that are going out trying to, we've all seen it. You're in the airport in Boston all the way to the expo, and it's a cultural phenomenon, So that was that, and then working with Des and Josh Cox the last 3 or 4 years has been really enlightening, and they were great partners. But just seeing, how you could utilize it. You get an athlete now you've got a purebred racehorse that has real marketability, and working in that relationship where they're kind of collaborating with you, and you're kind of inventing marketing with that person. That was cool, because that took from really trying to spin hey, these athletes have these credentials, but compared to X, Y, or Z, they're not here, to someone, okay, we actually have a world major marathon champion, probably the biggest one to American fans, and in this crazy scenario with this amazing story where she's pacing Shalane and Molly and all, I mean, and all true stories, right? And then somehow comes out on top. I mean, it was like, you couldn't write it better. And she's going to write a book at some point, and I'll be the first one that reads it, but, so that was great. And then, so really feeling like I was kind of earning some stripes through all that. And yeah, to your point. And then the other big one is, and it kind of flies under the radar, but the PR invite that Jesse and I both created together. The learning with you want to look at the guys from Donovan Brazier to Christian Coleman to Drew Hunter to Grant Fisher to all these guys who ran at our meet and ran top high school times at the time. And
Candace Hill,
Candace
national
Hill,
record.
still, up until, Shikari in Austin last year, which Shikari ran our meet, but she slipped in the blocks and that was a whole thing as well. But that was a brainstorm on a run. I told you guys this morning, like, so many good ideas come on runs. I love it when a good idea comes out of a run because it just validates my whole life, But it's like that run, and then and then the brand was smart enough to kind of invest in us. And I know, in the early days, it was really a partnership with Flow even, kind of building that. And so just a ton of learnings from that as well. And just really powerful relationships for me, that I've had, which probably includes the two of you guys. And, and then I know, Alex, you were announcing the meet for me the last couple of years. And so, so that, you're kind of building your toolkit, right? And you're also saying, okay, I would do this again, or, maybe I wouldn't try this, or, work with this guy, not work with that guy, or, it's been a fun journey, but this new journey is pretty exciting, and honestly coming in just such a unique time, and like I said, being a little fortunate to have landed with such a good brand that's really has a lot of momentum behind it. So
I think, well, one, you mentioned some of the Brian Sell stuff. I mean, that was some of the stuff that made me fall in love with Flow. Was when he did, I don't know if you remember the Home Depot, he was working part-time at Home Depot. Like, that is some of my, favorite old school blue collar, that could be me too. You know what I mean? I think that was so inspirational. I will never forget those vids. I think it's interesting, Steve, you talked about, that's the typical sports marketing moment, right? Where it's like, you throw a lot of things at the wall and sometimes some stick. And, the moment that Desi won Boston, it was like, again, like this, it was like you hit the jackpot as far as things aligning in that moment for the brand and for Desi. But that's kind of like our traditional, when I say like track and field traditional sports marketing moment, right? In the now, though, the evolution of what sports marketing is in 2020, I'd love to chat about. We see groups coming together now that are being stemmed organically, right? How do we continue to balance that authenticity of brands that might start organically? So the Tin Mans, the Boschard Group in Crested Butte, those were spurned on through the athletes and their relationships, and they're just yearning to train with a certain person or in a certain place. But we also have these kind of traditional brand bred models. So how can we meld the authenticity that we get from those groups that start from just an athlete's personal connections with the logistics and the resources of a brand bred group?
Yeah. No, I know we chatted about that earlier. I think it's a really interesting and important idea. Tin Man, I give those guys a lot of credit. I mean, wherever you fall on a Tin Man group, I know some people love them, some people love to hate them. What they're doing is I think it's important for the sport, is there's an energy there. And regardless of how they're finishing at USA Championships and all that, I mean, Jerry owns a lot of that. But, Tin Man has something that Jerry's group isn't doing, which is just this grassroots, you show up to those workouts in Boulder and there's 50 people and it's a groupie. It's like a rock concert going around, and Drew Hunter's kind of like the front man. But I think that's not the right model for a corporate group that, has you've got specific strategy and whatnot, but there's something to that energy that needs to be a part of, versus if you want to compare to the NOP where it was all cloak and dagger, nothing was, there's no access to workouts, very much, which is part of, to my in my opinion, is a little bit of their downfall. It's a little bit of the Lance Armstrong. Like, just don't be a jerk to everybody, and you might end up okay here. But so I think there's a middle ground where you can have a corporate team that also has community engagement, and fans can be a participant in what you're doing. And you're even seeing other major league other major, the NFL and MLB and other, or particularly like MLS is a great example. Like in Portland, it's huge. In Seattle, it's huge, and Atlanta, I know it's huge. It's becoming, and it's because the teams have a much more community centric model, and they're engaging with, and there's some sort of participation with the fan. And so one of the things we did with this team, and so athlete one for us is Joe Clucker. And so we reached out to Joe, and look, I didn't have a lot of ammo in my bag because On is developing its performance product right now, and it's looking really good. But I didn't have the records, I didn't have the past athletes. So the pitch to Joe was really, hey, we need you to come build something with us. And I knew he had the personality. If you've met him, his mom was an Olympian. Dad was a world record holder in the 50 mile. I mean, just this, and the guy is just bleeds confidence, and he's this good-looking guy that just tough, and I think there's a lot of things to like about him. But the pitch to him was like, look, you can go join Jerry's group and just be, one fish in a giant ocean, or you can kind of be athlete one here and help us build something. And I said, and part of that is, to your point with this Tin Man is a good example, is like, how are we going to build a community, a fan base around this group, and so help us kind of write that script, help us be a seat at the table essentially. And that was, there's some limitations there, but that was very authentic, and he has been pretty involved. And, we soon after signed Carlos Villarreal and Oliver Hoare, and Joe was a key player in that. I mean, he was messaging those guys saying, hey, you guys come out to Boulder, join what we have going on here. Like, this will be fun. Like, let's train together. And then Dathan Ritzenhein, who we signed on as coach, I had a relationship with Dathan in my former life, and everybody knows who Dathan is, and just a good dude. And if you've hung out with Dathan for more than 5 minutes, you just he's a massive student of the sport. He just knows. He's been injured every way times 10. So he knows the routine, and he has the connections, but he also was a CU guy just like Joe. And so I went to Joe and I said, look, we have a few names here for coaches, but what do you think about Ritzenhein? And he just his eyes lit up, and he just thought that would be amazing.
So did Joe join before he knew
Yes.
that Ritz was a coach?
Yeah. So it's a little bit backwards.
You
but
had the athlete before the coach.
We had Joe first because we thought it absolutely was backwards, and I can't give you a 100% rationale, but there was a market opportunity to get Joe, and we thought we need to start with like a premier athlete and someone that Joe's going to be hopefully in the sport for a long time. I really think he's going to be one of the next best U.S. marathoners at some point. And so we started with him, but quickly thereafter got Dathan involved, and Joe was like, so to some degree, it's pretty rare to have an athlete be at the table deciding who the coach is going to be, but that was some degree what Joe had. Now, I had a relationship with Dathan. We had talked about some coaching down the road, and so that was always in the back of my mind. But
That's why you were at Brooks.
Yes. Yeah. And
he was with Hanson's
He was with
at the
the
time.
Hansons at the time, and kind of had a little bit of success, but he was definitely on the back end of his career, and you could tell he wanted to coach, and he had already started coaching a few athletes in Michigan, and so that happened, and Dathan joined up, and then now you've got this, you've got a couple of key players that we can really build something here.
So I jumping into the team here. And before we get there, I'd like to establish, where did this idea of a team for On start? Was that part of the pitch when you took the job? Did that come once you got there? Where how did that come about, and those ideas surface?
It was kind of part of the pitch, but
was it your pitch to them or their pitch to you?
It was my pitch to them.
Okay.
And I came in, and look, the people that I was hired because because of some of the relationships I have in this sport specifically. But my boss is a great marketer and had a lot of agency experience, but he's not necessarily the track guy. So he said, "Look, Steve, we're going to let you just create something here," which is that was frankly part of the reason I was interested, because everyone wants to be able to create something, and so when I joined, and so Andy Weeding, two-time Olympian, is we're on the team here. And when I joined, I talked to Andy and I said, what are you trying to do here? You guys have kind of dabbled in the sport a little bit, and we had some existing assets and things like that. And Andy had the exact same idea as me. He's like, we got to create a team. Like, it's the best way for us to storytell. You can kind of control your branding to some degree. You can pick the people you want, and it's just so much easier from product development to storytelling to, there are all those fun buzzwords in the sport. And so the fact that we were aligned, then it was just, okay, let's just get to money and start moving here. And fortunately supported that and went above and beyond. And it has some creative budget shifting with the monies that I had on the table, but it worked, and they continued to kind of give the thumbs up. And so we've it's a little bit of a stone soup scenario. We started with a pot full of water and threw a rock in it, and then threw an onion in, and then threw a carrot, and then by the end of it, you got a track team. So,
and that's what I mean. I think with the launch of the Beast and probably some other initiatives with PR Invite at Brooks, just getting budget for these things. I mean, now we're talking about in the middle of a pandemic, right? Where, I don't envision that you started with the whole chunk of what has now been built. I mean, what was there an internal sales pitch? Was there how did that process work?
Well, it's funny. I told this, and Alex understands this 100% because he was in this world. But it's every dollar you get in sports marketing is a fight. Even people don't even understand. They think Nike's a blank check. It doesn't work that way there. People are fighting for dollars.
Yes.
Spikes are losing business for everybody, including Nike. It's a marketing vehicle, and so it takes the right leadership to understand. So one of the big reasons I came to On is that, Olivier Bernhard, who's founder, he understands it's important to be authentic in the sport, and he's all in there. And to have leadership like that is pretty rare. Phil Knight was there at Nike for a long time, but you start to get more corporate people that are looking more at bottom lines, and that's important, obviously, to pay everyone's mortgages, but to invest in the sport takes vision. And so we started with the original budget was definitely not enough to fund what we are definitely committed to a lot more dollars than was on the budget when I started, but it was, like I said, it was a little bit of stone soup. We went and we got Joe, and there was money for him. And then I went back, and I should say I did create kind of a internal document that was outlining what we were going to do here, why we would be spending this money, what this is going to give us. It was all the business stuff, which I won't bore you with, but they liked that, and they liked some of the ideas. But then it was, you get Joe, and then people get excited there, and it's like, well, if you give me a few more dollars, I can get this guy. And they thought, okay, do that. And then, well, these two guys are friends with this guy, and he really wants to run.
Yeah.
So if you give me some more dollars, and then, when we got Alicia Monson on board, it's like, look, probably the biggest female coming out of NCAA in the distance category. Like, we need a female here to kind of launch the women's side, so I'm going to need a lot more money over here. And at every round, they gave me the thumbs up. And I think, there's a lot of trust, in what we're doing, what Andy and I are doing, which is really, I guess it's a little unnerving, but it's also like, it's pretty cool,
Yeah.
And in Dathan, it's funny, actually, Dathan is a side story. They were a little incredulous at first. I brought in Dathan. I said, look, 3-time Olympian, former American record holder, all this stuff. And they were like, eh. But I got him on the phone with Olivier, and Olivier calls me the next morning and says, Dathan's it. He just sent me, or he actually sent me a text. He said, Dathan's it. He's the right guy for the job. Sign him. So whatever Dathan did with the phone call with Olivier, and now apparently Dathan is quasi-coaching Olivier's nephew in Switzerland. And we were just joking. I was like, it's part of the gig, man. It's one of those side gigs I think you're just going to have to like commit to. So, yeah.
You said you created this internal business doc. You don't want to bore us with, I get, but I'm actually a little interested in it because you are what you described in a room full of folks that weren't runners first, right? And so you're talking to them about Joe Klecker and Dathan Ritzenhein. You're rattling off NCAA stats, and they're probably like, all right, great, they won NCAAs. I don't know what this time means. So what on the business side of it resonated with from a marketing perspective, or if it's an ROI perspective? How do you translate that to folks that aren't runners first?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it takes vision, because it is really difficult in sports marketing to attribute return on investment with almost anybody, unless your last name is Jordan and you have a footwear line that creates $150 million in revenue its first year out. Nobody in the sport, even Usain Bolt, I'm sure there's some ROI, but he was getting a lot of money from Puma. And so it started with them just with the vision saying, like, we have to be authentic in the sport. And to some degree that's just a line item on the P&L statement, and we're just, it's investment sport, and we're going to assume there's going to be some goodwill when people are making purchase decisions down the road. Now, that being said, like, there's obviously got to be some strategy, and everybody has a different take at what that strategy is. And in my opinion, this was the right route for the smaller niche brand like On. Let's consolidate our investment here into particularly the middle distances on the track. We get a lot of bang for your buck in middle distances. And let's create a team that people can kind of become fans of, regardless of if one guy is injured or not. You look at what Bowerman's done, and it's just they're a brand in themselves inside of Nike, and they're doing all these amazing things. And at any given time, there's a handful of people that are injured. I could name off a few of them right now, but it doesn't really seem to matter, because there's always somebody running fast. There's always somebody hitting the headlines. And so, I put together a doc. And the other thing is, look, and this was in my job description, they're not looking at Tokyo, they're looking at Paris and LA. And they said, we want to build something for 24 and 28, that's really refreshing. Like, I don't have to go and try to create something out of nothing. It's a long-term vision, which is why guys like Joe and Alicia were really good signings for us, because they're going to take a few years to develop, but I really do think you're seeing them in U.S. Olympic teams down the road, if not on the track, definitely in the marathon and in other distances. So it was really building a plan for Paris. And the other thing is, we're very much an international brand. So this team right now, there's 5 countries represented. It's U.S., it's Poland, it's New Zealand, it's Australia, and it's Mexico. And we're very intentionally it's not just going to be U.S. based. There'll be a core of that. But, we're trying to, it's a Swiss brand. We're in most major markets around the world. And so we want to be at the Olympics having a lot of different countries being represented on the On roster. So
all those countries being represented also helps with team camaraderie. Because you can see that sometimes where there's a little bit of tension that somebody's going to take another person's world spot. You know what I mean? I want to go back to, there's this moment where your leadership says, Ritz is in, and there's green lights, and there's excitement around this idea, right? And this is a really fun moment for track and field fans to know that there's another player in the game, there's another team growing and pushing the envelope, and that's all fun and positive, but the challenge is, how do we sustain it? Because we've seen investments in teams before, and it sometimes fades slow. It's like just a slow fade, right? And I guess, like, how do we cement the longevity and the resourcing and the momentum behind the support of a team like this? Because we've seen it before in track and field, but how do we keep it rolling?
Well, I think there's a couple key things there. I think one is that On is 100% rooted in performance run. This isn't a fashion brand that's trying to get into run. It's not a brand that used to be run that, that I can think of a few brands that kind of waffle back and forth between who they want to be. I've had several conversations recently with GM of North America, with a couple of the executives. Like, reminding me time and time again that this is a performance run company. This is our DNA. We may make products outside of that, but this is ultimately going to be which, I think Nike has done a great job of. I don't like to give them too many pats on the back, but they've certainly grounded themselves there. And so I think that's first is critical, because if you have a brand that decides that one day they want to jump into run, and you've seen this happen time and time again, and they throw a bunch of money into it, and then a new leadership team comes in a year later, and
Totally.
that funding is cut, those athletes are distributed. I don't see that happening on Honest. It's a privately held company. It's doing incredibly well financially, and it just doesn't. They're not accountable to the same sort of like shareholders that other brands are, where you've got a bunch of cooks in the kitchen. There's a few core people, one of which was a pro athlete himself for 13 years, who are going to be investing behind this, and so that's one big thing. And the other thing is, there's a reason we have this one team. If you get a model where it's like, well, this team model worked, let's go start another team. Let's start another team. I think we're going to focus on this group. We will have other athletes. We just signed Jake Riley for obvious reasons. He's going to be running in Tokyo, and he's going to help us build the best marathon flat we can build. But this On Athletics Club is going to be the primary investment in the sport, at least on the track, and that allows us to focus to make sure that we may only add a couple people every year, but it's going to be the right people that have the right culture fit, that gel with Coach Ritz, and then build around invest in the talent we have, the Alicia Monsons, the Joe Cluckers, the Carlos Villarreals. I mean, these guys are highly talented, and that's the other thing is, so you mentioned people competing in the same event. Andy Weeding, that's some perspective. He came and he was like, look, when I was at OTC, there was 5 of us competing for the same Olympic spot. And he said, that starts to wear on you. And we intentionally, when you look at right now, Jordy Beamish, Carlos Villarreal, Ollie Hoare, and to some degree Joe Clucker, even though it's a little bit longer distance, these are guys competing for 4 different Olympic teams. So they can be best friends competing, go to their respective Olympic teams, make them. And if you're competing, if the final competition is at the final of the Olympics, so be it. So I think there's a lot of strategic decisions that are there and are guiding us that maybe don't show up on message boards or in articles and magazines and things like that.
I have a question about product. You teased it a little bit. You talked about On needs to be performance first, right? And Klecker is going to help you build Jake's going to run in the best racing flat that On can create for the Olympics. Has the idea of creating an elite athlete system inside of a brand pushed pushed the product team a little bit more and challenged them even more? Because I'm sure you come to Joe and like, hey Joe, sign with this company that you've never worn before, you barely know, and you has a racing flat that I can't even get my hands on right now. So I guess what has the evolution been? So how did you sell an athlete on a product that none of them knew at all, and then B, once you sign them, you have to turn around and say, hey product team, get your shit together. We need to accelerate what you've perceived in 10 years into the next 10 months.
Yeah. No, I mean, there was definitely some promises there. But, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg conversation with product. Like, we did have some elite product, but we obviously everybody, the Vaporfly kind of changed the paradigm in the sport. And so everybody's in that boat. The good news is that On is small and nimble enough that, we have just recently created an entire kind of product vertical around creating performance product for our elites. And we, when I was in Boulder this past week, we brought the head of this footwear group, and he was working with the athletes, getting feedback. We had a whole lunch with Jake, and we just sat down and talked about materials and geometry of shoes and things like that, and he's leaving with notes. And so I would say with the chicken and egg, like, yes, getting this team really lit a fire with the executives saying, okay, now we got to go support this, because you build all this. It's a cost loser ultimately building these products. It's not a profit center, right? It's building the brand. It's not building, you're not going to go make a bunch of money on a, $250, even though I think people think there's high margin. There's not. The amount of money to create those shoes, it's crazy. It's crazy expensive to make those shoes. So you're building it to build your brand. And so that's the investment. But it's like, well, you need the athletes to support these shoes. So we got them the athletes, and they very quickly have followed up with investing not only in employees to support that, but also just an infrastructure and a process. And that was, frankly, it was in my job description as well, as we need to tie athletes with product. And so, I've been very conscious. That was part of that deck, Ryan, you were asking about, was also like, how do we integrate the performance product process with our athletes? And, we can, once again, with one team strategy, you can go to Boulder and you can have people working with athletes one-on-one and creating shoes, spikes, flats, whatever it is that work for that athlete. And then everyone just has to figure out how we interpret it with the new IAAF/World Athletics rules that are out there now. But so really good question, and we're problem solving that right now, but I'm really confident in the product. What I've run in recently has been really a huge step forward.
I want to ask about athletes in this process with a brand and within sports marketing. I think you hear a lot that, hey, there's not an ROI on track and field athletes, but it was funny, years ago when I was younger, someone in, I forget what company in sports marketing, is talking about assets they have and athletes being an asset. Coming from the content world, an asset was a photo or a video we needed to get out, and we used that to market the meat. But this human is an asset for the brand from a marketing sense, and what you just described, an asset for the product team and developing and pushing products. So just kind of talking about, it was when I first heard that years ago, it was like it almost made them feel not human. It's
Right.
like, oh, it's this thing. It's they're this thing that we need to use, but they are right. They are an asset, and so you're not necessarily saying, hey, here's this person that's going to sell X amount of shoes for us because they have this big name, but here's this vision we have to use them in storytelling or product development or whatever it might be. How is an athlete an asset? In what ways?
Yeah, well, and frankly, look, employees are assets. Employees are the most important assets a company owns. So it's really, it's just the vernacular you're using, right? It does sound very dry and cold and all that. Ultimately, if you're a small brand, the athlete has to be more than just their results, because, and frankly, if you're playing the numbers game like Nike, you can literally just base everything on podium finishes at Olympic finals and world champs and things like that. We have to be much more creative, and to me, it's an asset, but it's a partnership with another human being, and you're joining them for their journey, for the up, down, and that might mean the lowest of the injuries to the winning the Boston Marathon, right? A couple of good examples prior to my time are, we sponsored Nicola Spirig, winningest Ironman female triathlete of all time, and she had, before some of the news cycle stuff came out last couple of years with females and pregnancy and sponsorships, she had given birth to a couple of children, and On had not only supported her through that, but it said, this is a really cool storytelling opportunity to show this elite athlete who's going to train through having children in a healthy way and then come back to compete. And we're not going to cut her contract for a year, wait till she comes back as healthy, but we're going to continue to support her fully funded through this, but then share her story with everyone. And there's a lot of, my wife has had 3 kids, and she's run through all of it and has gone through there's all sorts of unspoken stories with women going through pregnancy and trying to run and train. And so why as a brand wouldn't you want to reach out to that demographic, And so that's one story. Another is Tim Don, another triathlete who was a world record holder in the Ironman. And he 2 days or 3 days before the Kona championships a couple years ago, he got hit by a truck and broke his neck.
Right.
And we're like, okay, you've invested all this money as an athlete, he got to the point where you're paying him to be, and now he's got a broken neck, which sounds callous, right? But on a line sheet, you're like, but On used the opportunity. We created an entire documentary around him. He had screws put into his skull to put one of those halo things around his neck.
Yeah.
And so they went into the surgery, documented his comeback. And he's literally in a gym with this cage around his head doing 10 pound weight, squats and things like that. But I mean, it's making lemonade out of lemons, or maybe a better metaphor is just looking for the positive spin or opportunities because we're all humans, right? And we're all living these lives and have respective journeys, and these athletes are just another human, maybe with some amazing ability that you and I don't have. We aspire or are inspired to have or whatnot. But it's about the storytelling with that person, which is why I like being part of a smaller brand, because we can have a more intimate relationship with the athletes we have. And a guy like Joe Klecker we can get him right from the beginning of the journey. And then, let's just see. I'm incredibly excited to kind of see where his career goes and how we can, partner with him to be there in those moments. And, he's going to get injured and he's going to win some stuff. And we're going to be there both sides of that pendulum to tell his story. And I think, so that, asset, it's a horrible word, but if you're in a boardroom, you got to use that sort of language if you're talking with the finance guys. But in marketing, we like to talk about partnerships and stories and those sort of language.
It's a partnership, not a sponsorship, right?
I mean, that's the new word, but it makes so much more sense, right? I mean, even with you guys being in town and helping do some video content with us, to me, you guys are friends of mine first and foremost, but this is kind of a partnership, right? And we're kind of mutually getting things out of this. And I mean, frankly, it's not any different than your partner at home that you've chosen to live with. And I mean, you're taking a journey together with somebody, right? And you're kind of sharing the highs and the lows and the in-betweens. And to me, that's the best athlete. And that's really long-term athlete. I mean, ultimately, if you can have an athlete for a couple of Olympic cycles or even longer, that's where you're going to get the real value out of that relationship, that partnership with the athlete. And so that's the goal.
Well, you've talked about partners at home. You've talked about your wife and 3 kids. You've spent a lot of time with us, and I know you got to get back to them. So one thing I want to ask as we part here is, what it's a big year ahead, and you guys are making a big push and big initiative in a lot of different ways. What should we expect from the On Athletics Club, and what are the stories, and what is that vibe around this club that will help shape what On Running is?
Yeah, I mean, we're building some content now that may or may not be seen by the time this airs, but we're really, like I said, the performances will come. We got the horses, essentially, for lack of a better adjective again, these guys are going to go out and they're going to run fast, and I'm 100% confident that Dathan is going to get them there. From what I've seen in a short span already, he's going to be a really good coach in the sport, a pro coach. But we're really just excited to, we're going to have a content plan to try to continue to keep regular engagement with fans. So if people want to dial in, follow these guys on social media, their individual accounts, team accounts, just look for opportunities. We're going to try to have a lot of opportunities to connect to make Joe Klecker, if you want to be a fan of Joe Klecker, then we want you to be a fan, and we want to make that easy and give you reasons to want to root for him, and that's ultimately my goal, is how do we get people to want to root for the OAC when they're at a track meet, or they're just doing their Strava challenge at home or whatever it is, Which, by the way, apparently Joe is just crushing everyone's Strava in Boulder. It's demoralizing. I talked to some other pro athletes the other day. He did some sort of 8-by-mile workout. They were everyone's just
he uploads his runs from the last year and just crushes.
I'm a little behind on the
Klecker-geddon. I think there was a Krar-geddon once. Rob Krar joined Strava and Flagstaff. Now Klecker's decimating everyone's KOM in Boulder.
But that's one of those things. As a marketer, it's okay, you have an athlete that's doing this. How do we throw some gas on this fire, right? So that's the goal, And so I wish I don't have a 6-month calendar for you, but we would love some more to start creating a groundswell of fandom around this group. And, I would hope at the end of the day, this team has you may root for your local NFL football team or whatever. We have we have a fandom that just supports the OEC wherever they go, and I'd love if it was incredibly irrational and people were just, they were fans and they're face painting and doing whatever.
Sounds like Division III cross country
Right, like the American Outlaws of track fans.
Yeah, that's the goal. But we're really, really excited here, and I feel incredibly fortunate and lucky to be where I am, and I know that amidst all this, a lot of people are struggling right now. So hopefully we can just be kind of a bright light and kind of shine a little fun into the sport. And that's the goal at the end of the day, is just to kind of share the journey with everybody and have some fun.
Cool. Well, Steve, thanks so much for joining us. It's exciting to see what the brand's doing. Always exciting to see another team launch, and you guys trying to make a splash in 2020 into 2021. So thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing some marks here too.
Absolutely.
So you got double whammy. 2 great, insightful interviews with Dathan and Steve Dekoker. Coming out of the conversation with Steve, Alex, one of the things I just thought about, anyone in their career, right, whether it's in sports or not in sports, and you're working your way up in your career. You don't really know necessarily where it's going to lead you, but kind of being there and your boots on the ground, making things happen, getting things done, being a part of some big projects, and also seeing some things being created and being there for those decisions to be made by people kind of above you. And then all of a sudden getting the opportunity to get into a position where you can take all this knowledge that you've amassed over the years, and you form your own thoughts along the way. And if I was able to do this, maybe I would have tried it this way or incorporated something. And now you're put in a role where you can actually do it and you can bring something to life. And so really cool to see Steve kind of live that timeline and be now at On, where there was a perfect intersection for him to make the next step in his career and for On to look for someone to help bring experience in this world of the pro side of running, working with groups and teams, working with athletes and agents and coaches, and bring the On Athletics Club to life.
Yeah, I appreciate that Steve is part of the project because he has those insights and he has those experiences. And I think, the first thing I hear when brand's going to, when a new group is forming, right? And I worry because we've seen groups start and fail and grow and just kind of fade away. Because Steve has all those experiences and those investments, I think my favorite part of the conversation was talking about how to make sure that this thing is, going to sustain. And this is not just a flash in the pan for On. And this is a new presence for track and field and a new player. And this will be a force for good overall in our sport.
Yeah. And on the Dathan side, I like our conversation with him. One, just because Dathan's a great guy to talk to, and you're excited to see him in this next phase of his career and find that opportunity to transition into something really meaningful after such a long and really influential career. I think about his career and where he came from high school to Colorado to Hudson to Alberto to the Keith and Kevin Hansen, and as an athlete and now as a coach over the last few years, and then as an athlete who's worked with some of the most influential coaches in the space over the last decade, the wealth of knowledge that he brings to the table as a coach for this new group is really unbelievable. And as an athlete, if you're thinking I'm great, I came out of the NCAA, I'm a champ, or I was record holder, or I'm on pace to make the Olympic team, my coach was never really at that level or really doesn't understand some of the things I'm dealing with. Dathan's a guy that's probably experienced it all. Goods and
Definitely.
bads.
Totally. Yeah, and I think what was cool about the interview is he said the word learn or learning probably 20 times. And I think that's when you get, that's a element and that's a signal of a great coach and a great leader, is one who continues to learn. And one of my favorite quotes from him was, we were talking about training philosophies. He goes, "Writing training plans is not coaching. right? Because although he does have that wealth of knowledge and all those training plans and all those buildups, right, and all those experiences, he still knows that like you have to have that core belief and that buy-in from the athlete, and that creating that culture is still like paramount. No matter how sexy, no matter what athlete you have or how dialed you think your special workout routine is, you got to have the culture and you got to create a healthy atmosphere for the athletes. So that, I think that was like such a great insight, and it's cool that he still maintains that perspective. So folks, I appreciate you joining us today. And, we actually had to keep this story beneath the grandstand. We really did. We had to keep it all under wraps and not tell you guys, but we are stoked to bring it out and tell the world and tell its origin story. And that's what we're here for. So if that's what you're here for too, we appreciate you joining us today, giving us your time, giving us your headspace. Please share, like, comment, enjoy. And until next time, we will see you beneath the grandstand.